up there. And that means they have to run through the pressure bulkhead to start with, and they have to run up into the vertical fin.
As the tail fin rips off, it severs critical hydraulic lines. The aircraft is paralyzed.
Once they lost the vertical fin and the hydraulic systems, the pilots were only able to minimally control the airplane with engine power. The airplane continued to fly in circles, up and down, virtually out of control.
This explains why the plane flies in a phugoid motion. Why the crew have extreme difficulty controlling the plane's descent. And why it cannot turn back to Haneda Airport and instead descends deep into the Kanto mountain range. The crew's only option is to ride the throttle, trying to maneuver the plane by powering each of the engines separately. At the mercy of their stricken aircraft, there is nothing the pilots can do. A crash is inevitable. Having delved deep into the investigation, we can now reveal the events that caused the worst single aircraft accident in aviation history. June the 2nd, 1978. 7 years to disaster. A JAL Boeing 747's aft pressure bulkhead is incorrectly repaired following a tail strike incident, leaving it critically weakened. 6:12 p.m., August the 12th, 1985. 44 minutes to disaster. The same JAL plane takes off from Haneda Airport, Tokyo. As the cabin pressurizes, tiny cracks on the repaired bulkhead begin to grow. "32 minutes to disaster. The bulkhead explodes. Pressurized air blasts into the plane's tail section, ripping off the tail fin and severing the hydraulic lines. 31 minutes to disaster. Captain Takahama declares an emergency. The pilots fight to control the aircraft, unaware that their basic flight controls are permanently disabled. The plane climbs and dips. The pilots struggle to maneuver with engine thrust alone. Eight minutes to disaster.
Turn right.
The pilots guide the plane down to 7,000 feet.
Right.
But it's now in the heart of the Kanto mountain range. 6:56 p.m. Seconds to disaster.
Pull up. Pull up.
But the tragedy isn't over. Testimony from one survivor reveals that others also survived the impact. "24 minutes after disaster, an American Air Force C-130 finds the crash site and reports its location to Japanese authorities. A hovering Marine Corps helicopter offers to drop 2 men onto the mountain. But just a minute later, an order comes through demanding they return to base. 9 a.m., 14 hours after disaster, the first Japanese rescuers arrive on foot at the crash site. How many more passengers could have survived if U.S. forces had been allowed to land becomes a focal point for bereaved relatives. To this day, there is no clear understanding as to who declined U.S. help. No one in the Japanese Self-Defense Force admits to ordering the U.S. crew to stand down. But in response to the crash and subsequent fallout, the Japanese Self-Defense Forces did purchase helicopters and equipment designed for nighttime operations in mountainous terrain. The disaster also has profound ramifications for Japan's air industry. JAL President Yasumoto Tagaki resigns shortly after the accident. The JAL maintenance manager commits suicide. A terrible price had been paid, and now lessons had to be learned.
One of the things I got out of this accident investigation was that the accident really was preventable if the engineering work on the repair 7 years before the accident had been scrutinized a little more carefully and done properly, the accident wouldn't have occurred.
Boeing confirmed an incorrect repair caused the failure of JAL 123's bulkhead. The company changed their procedures, so significant repairs are scrutinized before implementation and afterwards by a second pair of eyes. Regular checks are made to detect any signs of metal fatigue. To reduce the vulnerability of the 747's hydraulics, a valve was added to the line controlling two of the plane's elevators and the lower rudder. If this line is severed, some control should still be possible.
I think this accident taught the aviation industry a lot of lessons, things about airplane design and maintenance. It was really an important step in improving aviation safety around the world.
JAL admitted no liability for the crash, but offered to pay compensation. 90% of the victims' relatives settled with the airline without going to court. But neither the compensation nor the improvements to safety offered much comfort to the bereaved relatives.
There was a sense among, I think, all the victims, but certainly in my family, that this was wrong. That what happened was avoidable. That it didn't need to happen.